Today's Fiomi is Nedarim Gimel. We're going to start the new chapter, the chapter of Ein Ben Amudar, which is the fourth chapter of Nedarim. We're going to start at the bottom of Amabez, and 32b at the bottom. It says the Mishnah, Ein Ben Amudar Ana Mechavero Amudar Amen Umachal. There's no difference between somebody who's not allowed to have any benefit from his friend at all and somebody who says, I'm not allowed to benefit from food from my friend. The only difference is Drisa Saregel. The only difference between them is Drisa Saregel, Vikalim Shein Osim Bam Ochol Nefesh. The only difference between them is Drisa Saregel. What's Drisa Saregel? Whether or not you're allowed to walk through his property and food that you do not, and utensils that you do not use for food, that you don't make food from them. Meaning to say, if you're not allowed to have, if you're just limited to benefit from food items, you're still going to be allowed to walk through his property, and you'd still be allowed to use utensils that are not food-related utensils. But Hamud or Machal Chavero, me Chavero, but somebody who says, I'm not going to have any benefit of food from his friend, Lo Yashilano, Nafa, V'Kibra, V'Rechaim V'Tanur, is not allowed to borrow from him. Such a person is not allowed to borrow a sieve or a mill or an oven. These are items that are used in the preparation of food. Even the mill, which is used indirectly, because it's an indirect of indirect, it's two steps removed, it's still going to be prohibited to borrow from such a person. But you're allowed to borrow from him. But you're going to be allowed to borrow from such a person, chalok v'tabas v'talos in uzamin. But you're the one who says he's not allowed to benefit from him. He's still going to be for food items. He's still going to be allowed to benefit for a chalok, for a shirt, a ring, and a talos, a garment, and an uzamim, and a nose ring. He's going to be allowed to borrow all these things. So those are obviously not food items. So the Gemara is going to ask, what's the chiddush of that? So first, the Gemara says, Man Tana, who's the author of our Mishnah, whose other position that even though if you say you're not allowed to benefit from somebody else, we're going to be prohibited to walk through his property. That's called Patricia Serego. Who's the one who says that? Who's the author of this Mishnah? So Amar Avad Bar Abba Rabbi Eliezer, the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Eliezer. Titania, Rabbi Eliezer taught, Afilu Vitor also Bermudar Ana. Even Vitor is gratuity, like something that they just throw in extra, which the person giving to you doesn't really care about. Look at the Ran. The Ran explains, Mashadarkan Shamochrim, when somebody sells something, typically a storekeeper is Levater Levoklim. They have like samples or levater. They don't care. They waive the rights for the people purchasing. They add on. Here, you're buying a box of cookies. Here's another one for the road. Take it, eat it. I feel also vitor, even that little insignificant amount, also is prohibited upon the one who's benefiting. Even though it's a bad sale, even though it's not an object that people want. And so for this reason, Dris Sarego is prohibited. Just walking through the property is prohibited. Afagav the Kapti Bay continues, even though people don't care if you walk through his property. You don't mind if people walk through your property. But this position of our Mishnah is that it's not from the perspective of the person who has the property, it's from the perspective of the person who's walking through it. He is getting a benefit. So this position, the Gemara is going to say, this is the position of Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov, says the Gemara. This is Rabbi Lezer. The Tanya Rabbi Lezer Omer Afilu Vitor also Bermudar Ana. Even this insignificant gratuity is going to be prohibited by somebody who has been Mudar Ana. He's taken a vow against having a benefit. But the Rabbanan argue. They say the Rabbanan the Puigile Savri. I'm reading the Ran. They argue and say the Kol Echad the Lo Asar Lav Ela Anaso. Where you take a vow that you're not going to get benefit from your friend, this is not called benefit. Even the midi de lokapti beinchi who ain't zekari nana mechaber. This is something that people don't really care about. It's not called benefiting from his friend. So that's the fundamental dispute between the Rabbana and Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, whether vitor is considered benefit. So the Gemara then says the question, why is he prohibited to have any benefit from his sieve or his millstone or the oven? He took a vow against benefiting from the food. This is not a food. He said, the benefit of the food is upon me. Meaning to say anything that causes the food. Because meaning to say that he's benefiting upon himself any benefit that comes as part of the food preparation. So the Gemara says, well, since it's any benefit that comes from food whatsoever, not just eating it, any benefit that comes with respect to food, maybe he's also prohibiting we had this case in Pesachim, whether or not it's chametz, whether or not you should say from here, he's not allowed to chew up the wheat and put it on his wound, because that's also a benefit, and that's related to food. No, what he's really saying is any benefit that brings me closer to eating something, that's what's prohibited from you. And chewing up the wheat to put on your wound, that's not such a benefit. Amar Papa, so Papa taught Sakavi Peros, the Chamar Lavi Peros. Let's say you have a sack to bring fruit, or you have a donkey to bring the food. Or so you just have a basket. That's also a benefit that causes you to come closer to eating. That's a and so therefore that's going to be prohibited. So by Rav Papa, Rav Papa asks the following question: Susler kovala v'tabasli ropa. So let's say you want to take a horse, you want to borrow a horse to ride upon it to get to the restaurant. Is that considered a food-related item that you're borrowing? Or let's say you have a ring, you want to walk into the deli looking like a boss. You want this ring to look like a king when you walk in. So is that also considered a food-related item? Because when you walk in like that, they're going to give you the pastrami sandwich you've been waiting your whole life for. And so what's the story there? Maho. And also, and also, can you cut across his property under those circumstances? Because you're going to get the food closer. You're going to get the food earlier. So Tashma. So let's derive it from a proof from our Mishnah. But he can lend him a garment, ring, and rings. So even though you took a vow from him against eating his food or benefiting from food items, you're allowed to borrow his garment and his rings. So the Gemara says, well, Heichidami, what's our Mishnah referring to? If we're talking about a case just to wear it in your own house, nobody's going to see you. Of course you're allowed to do it. What's the chiddush? Of course you're allowed to borrow this thing. You took a vow against food items. So it must be, it must be that our Mishnah is talking about even in the case where you're using it to enhance your ability to get food. And you can borrow it. So this is proof that as long as it's such an indirect status, attenuated case, you can borrow it. Gemara says, no, we're not talking about such a case. We're talking about where you're not borrowing in order to be seen. It's just, it is random that it's putting in, because in the former case in our Mishnah, it lists those things that you're not allowed to borrow in order to eat. Tana Seifa Mashila, the Tana of the Seifa lists those things that you are allowed to borrow, even though you took a vow against him from benefiting from food items. Zak the Mishnah says, the Mishnah called Davar Shein Osim Bo Ochel Nefesh. And even if it's something, let's say you take a vow against a food item, even if it's something that you don't use for food preparation, but Malcolm Shemaskirin, but if it's a place where they rent it out, Kayotze Bayan Asr, then something similar to that case is going to be prohibited. Why? Because since you typically rent it out, then we're going to say then we're going to say that by just lending it to him without him renting it out, he has this extra money which he's going to use for food, and so therefore it's a problem. Because Rashi, the Ran says, because with the amount of money he's saving, he's going to use it to purchase food. So the Gemara says, Mikal, the Reisha, and so in our former clause, where he says that you're not allowed to borrow the oven and the mill, even though they typically don't rent those things out, you still can't borrow it. So Montana, so therefore, who must be the author of our Mishnah? The author of our Mishnah must be Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who says that this is Vitor. Even though it's insignificant, it's going to be prohibited to derive benefit from it. Says the Mishnah, Hamudar anam yechavero. Let's say somebody takes a vow against benefiting from his friend. Shokolo as shiklo, upareya as chogo. Somebody takes a vow against benefiting from his friend. He's allowed to shokolo as shiklo. He's allowed to pay his. So somebody's not allowed to benefit from his friend, but he's still allowed to pay his half shekel. So what is the law? That every Jew has to pay the half shekel, and this is an obligation you have to pay to the temple. But we're saying here under these circumstances, we're saying, and the half shekel was paid for the communal offering. But we're saying here under these circumstances, he's allowed to give it to the temple on the other person's behalf because he's not actually benefiting him. And why is he not benefiting him? Well, as we learned in Ksubos, remember when we did in Ksubos, Taf Kuf Zayin, that it's because if you didn't pay it, the court would have paid it on his behalf. So and you're allowed to pay off his debt. Why are you allowed to pay off his debt? Gemara is going to discuss that, but you're allowed to pay off his debt. So, and what else are you allowed to do? So if you find his object on the street, you're allowed to pay off his lost object on his behalf. In a place where if somebody returns the lost object and says, "Oh, okay, I missed my time at work. I usually am I'm a lawyer in a white shoe firm, and now I had to return your lost object." So, and they pay you for that, for the amount of lost wages you get in this case. So he has to give him the money. We'll see who has to give who the money. People are no actors. You give that money to the temple. The Gemara is going to discuss what is exactly the scenario there. But anyway, this case where we're saying that you can pay off his debt and you can pay his shekel, really you're not giving him any benefit. What you're doing is you're warding off a lion that could have otherwise attacked him. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that what this is, you're not really benefiting him. You're preventing a loss. Preventing a loss is not the same as benefit. There's one thing is benefit, and then the other thing is preventing a loss. And there's a big difference between somebody saying, "Oh, you're about to drop $100 out of your pocket," and somebody giving you a $100 bill. You're going to be more grateful to the person who gave you the $100 bill. That's actually a benefit, even though the other person did the exact same thing. The other person stopped you from losing $100. But psychologically, one is considered a benefit and one is considered just preventing a loss. So so therefore paying off his half shekel and paying off the loan on his behalf, all you're doing there is chasing away the lion, and therefore it's going to be permitted. So Montana, who's the author of our Mishnah, who says that paying off a debt is considered like it's considered like you're just chasing away a lion, and therefore it's permitted. Amar Avoshaya, Zo Divrei Hananhi. This is the position of Hanan. Remember, we had this Mishnah. At the end of Kesuvos. Remember, we had this Mishnah of Hanan and the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim. So remember that. So this is the Mishnah this is the position of Hanan. Who Hanan says, what was that case? We had this case in Ksuvos Kufcha Samad Aleph, where a person, when a husband, a deadbeat guy, he goes overseas and he didn't leave any money for his wife, did a bad thing. And then a different guy comes along and he says, oh, I see this woman. Her husband ditched. He went out of town and now he's supposed to pay her. He's not paying her. I'll pay her. Now, the guy who was the tzaddik who paid, he's not able to go back and make his claim from the husband because all he did was mavriach hari, because all he did was he chased away the lion because the husband had a debt. All he did was chased away the debt, and that's not going to be considered like he actually benefited the husband. And so too in our Mishnah, the person is going to be allowed to pay off the debt of his friend, even though he can't give him any benefit, because Hanan says that's not considered benefiting him. That's considered just mafriach hari. But the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim, who are in the top of the daf there in Ksuvos, Kufchas Amid Aleph, the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim, sorry, actually not on the top of the daf, on the bottom of the daf, they're going to be of the opinion that they argue with Hanan, and they say that the husband needs to pay what he's supposed to pay. And so therefore, they're going to be considered that he is benefiting the husband, and so therefore he needs to pay him. And so therefore, the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim would say that this case is not a case of chasing away a lion, it's a case of actual benefit. And so that's the dispute between Hanan and Bnei Kohanim Gedolim. And so therefore, we're saying that our position here, if you're not allowed to benefit a friend, that you're still allowed to pay off his loan, this is going to be considered like the position of Hanan as just chasing away a lion from him. It's not actual benefit, and therefore it's permitted. Rava says, you could say even the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim, who say in that case where you have to pay back the husband who went out of town, the husband who would have to pay back the person who supported his wife when he went out of town. In this case, even the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim, who argued with Hanan there, would say that nevertheless, you're not considered benefiting in this case. They would say that in this case, it's not considered to be a benefit. Why? Because Lagabi Mudar Hana, with respect to somebody who has a vow against benefiting from somebody else, this is not a regular bet. So they say, the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim say, what we're talking about here is where you gave a debt and you said you don't really have to pay, you gave a loan and you say you don't really have to pay it back. That's what we're talking about. That's the Ukimta. That's the case we're talking about. Such a case, Reuven lends Shimon $1 million. Reuven says to Shimon, you know what? You pay, you don't pay, don't worry about it. You have the money, if you pay it back, you pay it back. Comes along Levi is not allowed to give any benefit to Shimon. But anyway, you see Shimon owes $1 million, says, I'll pay it off for you. Well, that's not considered a benefit to Shimon, because Shimon didn't have to pay that money in the first place. So that's what the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim are saying. It's not a benefit. He didn't have to pay it back. So now the Gemara says, My Hanan, what's this case of Hanan? Now we're going to cite this Gemara, which you remember, which we did at the end of Ksubos. A guy goes overseas. A guy goes to the Bahamas. He leaves behind his wife and his 14 kids, and he says, "Sorry, you're on your own." Then the tzaddik in the town stands up. He says, "This guy left his wife behind. I'm gonna pay. He says, "Your grocery bills are on me. I'm covering your groceries." And he didn't communicate with the husband, and the wife didn't say it was a loan. And now the husband comes back from the Bahamas, and he's got his Bentley and all his money. And the tzaddik says, "Pay me back." Hanan says, "Sorry, you lost your money because he didn't give a direct benefit to the husband. He just prevented a loss from the husband." And the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim say sorry. They say Yishava Kama Hotzi V'Yitol. He says no. He has to just take an oath how much he spent, and then he can take it back. And Amar Avidosa ben Horkanes Kedivrayim. He said, Avidosa ben Horkanes says, I rule like the Chachamim, that they say that he has to pay back the money on behalf of his wife. And Amar Yochanan Zakkai Yafa Amar Hanan. He says Hanan spoke well. This guy who paid the money for the husband without the husband asking him to, it's like he put the money on the deer's horns. The deer's horns, deer is very fast. Just like you put the money on the deer, good luck getting it back. Good luck getting this money back. And so therefore, somebody left the money there without first making a deal with the husband, sorry, he's out of luck. So we see from here the Hanan's position, which is to exempt somebody. If you're not allowed to benefit the friend, you're still allowed to pay off his debt. That's going to be because it's just mavriach hari. You're preventing a loss. That's not the same as a benefit. And so the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim, according to this position, say you wouldn't be allowed to, unless we say that the cases where we're talking about a loan that doesn't need to be repaid. Then even the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim would say that the person can pay it back because you're not actually benefiting him. So now, how do we understand our Mishnah? So our Mishnah had said, Rava Amar, Rava lo Amar Rav Hoshaya. Rava does not explain like Rav Hoshaya. Rav Hoshaya says it's a dispute between Hanan and the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim. Rava doesn't want to say that. Rava wants to say we're talking about the special kimta, the special case where the guy lent him money and he said, you don't have to pay me back. Because he says our Mishnah is like everybody, meaning to say he was able to figure out a scenario where even the Bnei Kohanim Gedolim can agree with our Mishnah. And Rav Hoshaya doesn't want to say like Rava because he says, even according to Chachamim, they would say you're not allowed to pay off somebody's loan, even in a circumstance where the guy says, you don't have to pay me back. Why? Because if we're going to allow pay him back in this circumstance, where the debt doesn't need to be repaid, then he's going to come to pay off his loan, even in situations where debt does need to be repaid. And so that's why Rav Hoshaya doesn't want to adopt the position of Rava. Says the Gemara. You know what? We'll stop here. Take any questions. If anybody has any questions at this point, this beautiful Gemara, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Yeah, I have a question.